Good morning, brave fundraisers. I hope you can hear me okay. This is the Breakfast Club for Fundraising Leaders. We've got literally hundreds and hundreds of people registered for this one, and we know it takes a little while for people to get through the waiting room. So if you could just be patient for say 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to start the session proper as soon as we can, as soon as everyone has managed to get in. So hello, Anna and Petra and Joe. Lovely to see some familiar names there in the chat. Thank you for saying hello. Hello, Kimberly and Becky and Victoria and Jessica and Stephen, Natasha and Nicola and Jaspreet. Hello, Emma, Anna, Danielle. Lovely to see you guys. Thanks for saying hello. I'm really grateful you were able to make time for Breakfast Club, even when the world is going ever crazier, and even when you've got so much to do. You know, after the pandemic is hopefully easing away and the world wants to fundraise as much as possible, you're really busy. You signed up for Breakfast Club, and thank you for showing up. I am going to start in literally a minute or two. By the way, thank you to those Breakfast Club fans who send tweets and post on LinkedIn and so on. I'm always grateful if and when you can do that, because it just spreads the word. It helps more people find out about this free content that we put together, and it makes it ever more worthwhile if more people in more charities wherever in the world can be accessing it. So thank you to those of you who send little tweets and social media posts. I'm really grateful always for that. If you want to do that today, then our details are at the bottom. Emily Casson's are at the bottom there as well. Hello, Alex. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Tanya, Holly, Carla, Claire, Karina. Goodness me, so many people logging in. Thank you for doing that. And I'm going to give it 30 more seconds, and then we're going to get going properly. Hello, Nasli, tuning in from South Africa. Lovely to see you there. Kate and Sasha. Shout out to brave fundraisers everywhere, basically. Here we go then. I'm just going to click this button and do my formal welcome bit. And it goes like this. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the Breakfast Club for Fundraising Leaders. My name is Rob Woods. For 22 years, I've worked in fundraising, and for 16 of those, 70 of those, I've loved to put together training sessions and free events and so on, coaching to help fundraisers raise more money for their good causes. Katie was telling me yesterday, this is a new record for us. We've got, last time I'm counting, it was 824 people had registered from the UK and around the world for our Breakfast Club. So thank you for being one of those. I'm humbled and excited and mildly scared at the notion of how many hundreds of people are logging in for these things. So thank you for being part of it. Like I say, those of you who are able to share this stuff on social media can help us reach ever more people with this free content. So thank you if you're doing that. What's the purpose of this event? I know lots of you have been before, but if you've not been to one of these sessions before, number one, I'm trying to share real examples and fundraising ideas to help you as a fundraising leader or team leader. And number two, we're going to try and share techniques and principles that some of them you might pass on, and it might just reinforce something you're already trying to do with your team. But our example or our way of saying it might just give you an extra impetus to get some great fundraising happening. Clearly 60 minutes is not long to change the world. We're going to do our very best. Emily's worked really hard, busy as she is, to put together some great stuff, but we know that 60 minutes is has its limits. So for those of you who might want to find out more about other Brightspot services, like our 6-month mastery programs and our Brightspot Members Club, team memberships and so on, we're going to put a link in there. Obviously you can look at our website, but if you want a quick chat, follow-up chat, we can follow up if you put your details in the form. It'll take 30 seconds if you do that. Today, for best results, if you possibly can, have a notebook open and just write down the ideas that occur to you. We're not going to share the slides, although I am going to send out some resources and blogs and things that reinforce some of the things I'm talking about. But do write your good ideas down. Do crucially plan a time when you're going to reflect on them and work out what it means or how you might apply it. Or when you might share some things with your team. That second half of the learning loop is often sort of rushed over, but it's just as important as the ideas themselves. There'll be a bit of time at the end of Emily's talk to ask her some questions. So if you'd like to ask Emily a question, could you put that in the chat box, but at the beginning of your question, write the word question in capitals. In terms of timings, the first half is going to be Emily talking about digital fundraising, and the second half, I'm going to talk about corporate and major gifts techniques. Like I say, 60 minutes, there's a limit to how much we can do, although we're going to do our very best. If you want to go get ongoing access to these kinds of ideas and stories, and if you've not tried it before, do check out my podcast, Fundraising Bright Spots, on lots of the most obvious providers like iTunes and Spotify. And for instance, just two of the best we've ever done were with Emily. So if you like Emily's outlook, her down-to-earth approach of helping you see ways to solve this stuff, then you can get a lot from starting with episode 15 that Emily did way back when she was talking about this extraordinary growth that her team achieved when she was at Cats Protection, a really unbelievable growth. And in that she explains tactics, but so this fabulous mantra that basically was the team's philosophy. I hope she might actually include that in today's session anyway, because it really drives everything she's achieved to date. So without more ado, Emily is such an experienced digital marketeer and fundraiser. She achieves fabulous results. She's also extremely generous in helping, although she works for a slightly larger charity with, you might see it, more resource and a different brand. She is extremely generous at helping small organizations, especially in the Northeast. So she gets that it's not easy for smaller charities, but she's also seen these same principles work and apply. So I'm going to get rid of my slides so that if Emily is able to bring her slides up, and once that's done, so it's my huge pleasure. I was so grateful that Emily was able to make time for this. She might tell you in a minute, she's had the craziest week of her fundraising life to do with the emergency appeal her organization is doing to do with the Ukraine right now, and she's still made time to come and share this stuff with you. So Emily, thank you ever so much, and over to you.
Great. Well, thanks Rob for having me on. So I'm going to talk a bit today about how to really grow digital fundraising results and some of the amazing charities that really inspire me and how they've achieved. So as Rob mentioned, this is my philosophy that cuts through everything. So whether you work for a small charity or a large charity, this will apply to you. So think big. How can digital absolutely transform everything you do in fundraising, but across your organization? But often that's a really scary concept for people because there's so much that you could be doing. So how do you actually start small? So this is a picture of my little rabbit Fluffy. So how do you think, right, it's really small steps, little pilots, little thinkings, little tweaks, little changes to practice. And how do you scale quickly? And as Rob mentioned, come on to some of the numbers later, but we're talking about how we can do 100% growth, 1,000% growth. We're not talking about those 1-2% growth. We're talking about how we can really transform things. And also fail fast, which is a concept that is scary to a lot of people. But my little sister's a monkey keeper. So that's a picture of one of the monkeys she looks after. And they spend their lives fiddling about, trying to work something out, and then they fail, but they learn and they do it a bit better the next time. So how can we take that approach and say, actually, failing is a good thing, because if we're not failing, we're not innovating and we're standing still and actually falling behind. There was Rob mentioned that the backdrop to this presentation was I have had the busiest week of my life in terms of digital fundraising. So I work for a very traditional organisation that I'm in a brand new role, been there a few months now. And we went from last Monday talking about maybe we should potentially do an appeal, put some feelers out to some of my freelancers, and then launching in less than 24 hours. And my colleague did an amazing job of everybody coming together and working as a team to send out some communications. And how did it do? It's actually raised, well, as of this morning, £1.2 million in the last week, which is absolutely phenomenal and by far and away the biggest appeal we've ever done in the shortest amount of time in terms of the kind of growth of it, that we've spent less than 20k. So the ROI on that is amazing. And yes, we've had amazingly generous supporters, but we've also had a lot of new supporters. So why did that work? I think there were a number of reasons. That yes, the numbers are big because we've got a big brand and a big profile and get a lot of support, particularly around Christmas. But it worked because people had that trust, that supporters were already asking us, what are you doing? We know you'll be doing something on the ground already supporting vulnerable people. How can we help support that? So it was driven by supporters. And it was about that trust and showing that we were doing something and being very human to say it's an evolving situation, but this is how we're helping. And also making it really easy for people to donate, that we've got a new fundraiser platform as our new donation platform, and our conversion rates were 49.8% when the average is 15%. So that really, really helped. So these are all the sort of tactics and techniques that you can do. So in terms of the ideas I want to share with you today, the first one is, I hate the phrase digital transformation because it implies that you're going from A to B and you're going to get to a destination. It's much more thinking about the digital journey and how crucially to bring people along that journey. So yes, you need your aims and you need a plan and you need to think about how you can do that. But it's much more about the approach you take rather than the actual digital platforms and tools and techniques. So it's about changing mindsets. And I love the idea of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And you might have come across this concept before, but basically it's a different way of thinking. And we can change our mindsets. That digital fundraisers or people doing digital are often native growth mindsets, that they're constantly learning, constantly evolving. They're not afraid of failure because they see it as a learning opportunity, and they're constantly evolving and they love change and they support that. But the fixed mindset, which a lot of our traditional charities are, is actually the status quo has worked for many years. This digital thing's a bit scary. So it's how we can change that and bring people along with us, that accepting for some people change is scary. So how can we actually appeal to them? Is that a case of doing business cases and getting the numbers, or doing case studies from other charities? Or is it selling them the dream and showing this could happen? And that philosophy I mentioned at the start, that starting small, is really crucial in this to bring people along. So something that I would suggest you all do in your organizations is think, well, what are your digital principles going to be? So you'll see here, dynamic is the one that I've come up with. And that's working across all of your staff, your leadership, your volunteers, your trustees, to think about what are the key words that we want to do to drive our digital forward. And they'll be different for every charity, depending on your risk appetite, depending on your size. But I think that's something really practical you can take away and do. So who's doing this really well? That I was lucky enough to do a workshop recently with an amazing charity called Frank Water, which is a relatively small charity based down in the Southwest. And they were actually investing time in digital planning and upskilling staff and actually involving everybody and thinking, how could digital fundraising flow through everything? And the crucial piece a lot of charities struggle with is making the case for investment for something completely unknown. So it's how you can look at what other charities are doing and how you can do that small pilot and then scale it. So working with them on a plan to really build on their strengths. They are amazing at digital corporate partnerships. They send out some amazing social media packs to allow corporates to really get on board. And they've got some amazing corporates, like you see the example here, that really fit with their brand. So it's how you can get that synergy and share online. And moving very much to a test and learn approach, that not everything is going to work, and that is a bit scary, but actually you are spreading the risk by trying a lot of different things. So do check out this amazing charity that I love. So the second point that I would come to is around attracting the butterflies. So what do I mean by that? that butterfly donors are these donors that flick about different charities. So they're not as loyal as maybe previous generations were, but they're attracted by the cause rather than the charity, and they're attracted by the messaging. So how can we attract these butterflies? So part of it is actually our message needs to be really strong. We need to be really clear online. What is our aim? What is our goals? What do we want to achieve by using digital? But we also need to think about how we can get in the practice of social sharing, whether that's actually things like online streaming and building up online communities, or some of the great virtual events that are happening lately with the Facebook groups and challenges, and using our data to really understand that. So one of the key things I would say to you all is about knowing your audience or your target audience. That when I was at Cat Protection, one of my aims was to bring in a new demographic, a new generation of people. We had a very elderly donor database, which I think is common to many charities. So it was actually saying, how can we attract younger people? What is going to attract them? For some people, that's going to be a homeschooling ask. For other people, that's going to be they want tips about their cat. For other people, it's going to be the petitioning side in terms of they're interested in campaigning and lobbying. So it's really understanding your audience. And it got to the point that I knew exactly what my profile was, that I knew a 42-year-old woman on the way to work on a Tuesday morning on a mobile device, seeing a ginger cat that had a little ear injury rather than an eye injury with a cause-led messaging. That was going to be my best performing. So it's knowing your supporters to that level of detail to know what really works. And you don't need a lot of fancy tools for this. You don't need a lot of money to do this. Anybody can do this at any scale, looking at the data and insights. And also a lot of charities think very much in income products or different income streams. So how can you think, actually, we can amplify the message by all coming together to build some amazing journeys, and look at your data capture, that how you can really streamline and make that process work better for you, whether that's tweaking your pages or whether that's asking for different fields, whatever it is. So it's all about finding that sweet spot. So the right message at the right medium at the right time. For some charities, that's going to mean, right, get on the TikTok bandwagon and start using TikTok, and that's where your supporters are, and that's how you can engage them. For other charities, that completely won't be right. So it's you thinking for your charity what will work. And this approach really works. That my target initially at Cat Protection was to recruit 2,500 new leads that we could maybe steward into long-term supporters. We actually achieved over 100,000, which is phenomenal. And these people are long-term supporters. So these people aren't just one-off donors we're talking about. These people that are stewarded into regular giving, into volunteering, campaigning, legacy pledging. And it raised a lot of money. And yes, that is a big charity with a big profile. But all of these techniques I'm talking about will work for a charity of any size. But you don't need to have a big charity. You can all do this in just spending half an hour this week thinking, right, what is my audience, or what is my target audience, and how I can reach them, whether that's starting with maybe a 50 quid Facebook advert, a really, really small scale, or whether actually just doing a campaign with friends and family, with supporters, asking them to spread the word for you. So there's a lot of different things you can do on a really small or no budget, because as Rob mentioned, I've done a lot of stuff with Northeast charities that don't have any budget to do this, but it's how you can do it on a small scale and make that case for investment. So the third thing I want to talk about is, how do you nurture these online relationships? So you've attracted the butterflies, you've put out that great content, you've been on the right timings, you've been on the right platforms, but how do you then nurture them? So this picture of me and my niece kind of making hearts is, how do you really show that love? How do you show that you really want to value these people? And often in fundraising, we get bogged down with the numbers, and I'm a complete geek. I love the data, I love the insights, but it's actually real people that we're talking about. And that's really important to remember, that we're talking about real people and how we can build a relationship. So my top tip for this one is be more Geordie. For our international viewers today, that's basically been more like the North East people. There's lots of amazing case studies of big London charities, but I want to show the spotlight on an amazing charity I love here in the North East called Feeding Families. I'm a supporter of this charity because I was so inspired by their message, and they really talk on a human level. They don't have fundraising staff, nothing like that. They are a tiny little charity that started with one woman called Juliet's mission to give Christmas hampers to people that need them in the North East. So that peer-to-peer kind of support, that has massively bloomed into this massive need in the North East, sadly, around food banks and an all year round need. So what they do really well is they show the impact. You can see where my money is going and build up that relationships and think beyond the shopping list in terms of X equates to Y. That yes, you are actually donating a box of food, but it's more than a box of food. It's a lifeline for somebody, and it's showing somebody that somebody cares. So it's that really human approach that inspired me and others to donate. And that's something you can all do in your charities. And they're currently running an appeal to get 100 new regular givers, which is massive numbers for them, but relatively small scale and achievable. And this approach really works, that everybody loves a Geordie. That it's finding those individuals, but also the corporate and major donors, which are a good fit for your cause. So some of the examples here are the Newcastle Evening Chronicle Sunshine Fund, which is a lovely local charity that supports disabled kids in the North East. And every year the bus drivers dress up in ridiculous outfits and collect money. So it's a very traditional kind of fundraising, but they do some amazing stuff online as well around sharing that and do nice thank you videos. And it's raised over 40k, which is massive numbers for a small local charity. And it's also about having fun in fundraising. That you'll see the image there of Sam Fender, who's the patron of the charity that's about 100 yards from me, North East Homelessness. And he actually comes along and plays piano with homeless people. He does auctions. He gives a shout out when he wins Brits Awards. So it is about building up those relationships and that very human nature that comes automatically to the generous Geordie public. How can you have that across your organisation? So the last point I want to talk about is innovation. I absolutely love innovation, but I would say don't get distracted by shiny new toys. That you don't always have to be at the forefront leading digital innovation. Actually, sometimes it's better to be a follower. That in the past, I've done some pilots of contactless collection boxes years back when the battery life was hopeless and they were really buggy, and that actually put a lot of people off. So sometimes you're better waiting, seeing other people making those mistakes and then launching in. So who's doing innovation really well? So I want to give a shout out to Edinburgh Dog and Cats Home and the lovely Nicola and her team there. So they've really embraced cryptocurrency. They're one of the few charities to do so. And they got a massive donation last year of 87k. And they've had more donations this year. And it's not just donations, they're really building relationships and partnerships with people using cryptocurrency, different community groups on that, and different partners. And that's not going to work for everybody in terms of cryptocurrency, but they really embraced it. So what did they do differently as a relatively small Scottish charity? That it came about actually somebody wanted to donate and they didn't have the ability to take that donation. So they went and really researched this and really looked at it and invested in digital. And I don't mean invested in digital just in terms of money. I also mean in terms of time and in terms of learning and having that growth mindset I was talking about earlier and really thinking big. And they've also recruited a digital trustee, which I would urge all of you to do. That we're not all going to get Innovation Matt with his Innovation Cat, that some of you know, but that is something practical that all of the charities can take away and really say, actually, digital is really important to us. We want a voice at senior leadership level on that, and we want to really embrace it. But digital innovation doesn't have to be scary. That I've mentioned charities large and small today, some with big fundraising teams, some with no fundraising teams. And a lot of people think, oh, well, that's not for me. I need a budget for that. A lot of these things, you don't need budgets. And it's thinking about, well, what are those small steps you can make to really make that transformational change, like some of the charities I've mentioned today are making. Some of them are kind of further on that journey than others. But here's some starter for 10 suggestions that meet somebody in the chat and just mystery shop each other's donation pages and give feedback. And that could be the single biggest thing you do this week in terms of tweaking your donation page and improving your conversion rate. Or try signing up to your own email comms or testing your social. And it doesn't have to be some big innovation team. It can be as simple as setting up, right, we're going to have an innovation supper every month, invite staff, invite volunteers, invite supporters, invite audience along to share ideas, what they've seen in the outside world, what other charities are doing, and what you could do. So kind of come to the end now. So I want to leave you with this. So in terms of next steps, and this is actually my sister's real staircase, that think big. Where could you go with digital? How could you reach those transformational results other charities are making through changing your mindset and changing your approach? How can you start small? How can you do those constant tests and learns and pilots? And how can you scale quickly or fail fast? And be ambitious and support each other. And something I would say is all charities are somewhere on this journey. So find a one that's in a similar place to buddy up with, and find a one a bit further along that you can talk to and get advice from. But I basically want to leave you with this message that go forth and do digital. It's not scary, and it can absolutely transform your fundraising.
Wow. Thank you ever so much, Emily. So much great content in a short space of time. I'm going to cut straight to questions, and sorry in advance if we don't have time to cover your question, but just to get things moving, there was a question from Daniel and it's slightly gone away from my screen now. So forgive me, Daniel, if I get the words wrong, but the gist was about data capture and young people, as much as anyone, being maybe reluctant to give away their data, and Daniel's talking about a platform called Toucan. I don't know if you've heard of Toucan. What do you think of Toucan? Could it work? Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, Toucan was on Dragon's Den recently, and it's very much around the support they're giving to different charities without that data capture. But I think what I would say around data capture is basically give people a reason to sign up to your emails, to follow you on social media, that people are passionate about charities. And yes, a lot of people, it's very much seen as, oh, younger generations don't want to give us the details. But it's like, well, actually, are we giving them a reason to? If you're really interested in the cause, you're going to want to get updates about it. So it's really being clear on that. And Toucan might take off, but I would say actually it's more about the cause rather than charity. So it's how you can really get across the impact people are making and say, right, if you sign up to our emails, this is the amazing content and the added extras we're going to give you, or on social media, rather than being afraid to ask for people's data.
Great answer. Thank you. Next one, there's a question from Lisa. I think she's got, what if you've only got a very small database of, say, 100 donors? Where do you start? And someone else kind of similar, but we've done no digital at all. Where do we start? So they're two different questions, but I don't know if there's an idea or two that might help both people.
Yeah, so I think I would say starting by, why do you want to use digital? So it's very basics that digital would be a great tool, but you still need the message and you still need to think why you're using it, rather than just saying, oh, everybody else is on digital, we need to be. So it's actually thinking, right, is it recruiting new supporters? In which case, I would say take a storytelling approach that starts small. Often small charities start with friends and family and spread out from there. So it's very local rooted, and that's when you can really build strong relationships with people. So you don't need to necessarily start with a budget. It can start with that initial network online. And it's basically asking your existing supporters, asking those 100 people you do have, right, can you all tell a friend about this? That's something really practical you can do. And overnight, you've then doubled your database. So it's that sort of really practical thing that you could do. Or you could invest in Facebook ads for kind of 50 quid. But I would say actually building up that profile and really thinking about who you want to attract and why you want to attract them is really important.
Mhm. Great, thank you, Emily. Slightly more in-depth question. Shout out to Nasli in South Africa. So thank you for this question. I may not kind of read out the whole thing, but I hope I'll get the gist of Emily's take on it. Emily, the question from Nasli is, recently Facebook and Instagram started limiting our videos to 1 minute. I've done some research. Seems like Instagram are doing their usual thing where they limit accounts posting from certain countries and accounts with smaller followings. Depending on where you live and how many followers you have, some people can even post videos up to an hour long, while some are limited to 30 minutes or 15 minutes, or like us, 1 minute. So she's laid out, based on her research, 3 or 4 ideas for how she might handle this. One would be to continue to post the YouTube links in their stories with super catchy captions to entice people to click through. Get video creators to create 1 minute Instagram cut that just shows the highlights of the longer video and ask followers to view the full thing on other channels. We could upload the whole video to stories where it will play through in 30-second increments and save all the snippets to our highlights. Or 4, video editors could slice up the videos. For example, they could divide a longer video into a minute and a half into 2 45-second ones. So she's already done lots of good research. I think she's just like any steer on instinctively from your, I'm guessing one of your answers is test, and one of those will do better than the others. But in addition to that, do you instinctively, what might you advise?
Yeah, well, I would say kind of a wider note on the platforms that particularly Instagram and Facebook are changing algorithms all the time. They're changing what you can do. So I wouldn't become too over-reliant on any particular platforms. But in terms of this actual example, people's attention spans are relatively small. So I would say you want that hook, you want that short snippet, and then send them to your website or send them to YouTube to watch the rest of it, rather than chunking it down in bits where they might not actually follow through with it all.
Great, thank you. And like I say, to everyone who has posted questions, I'm sorry if we don't get to all of them, but fairly, actually there's someone, yeah, I think Lizzie Hollis. Hello Lizzie, thanks for joining us. She's seeing if someone would like to meet for coffee. Do check in the chat for a small local organization. If you think your organization is about the size of Lizzie's, she's looking for a buddy as far as I can see, but do check Lizzie's post in the chat. And then the last question I think we'll have time for is from Olga. Emily, you spoke about using new donation landing pages for your Ukraine appeal, which led to a 49% conversion rate. Could you talk about what tweaks were made to that page with regards to your old one that led to such a high conversion beyond the timeliness of the topic, of course?
Yeah, so we introduced a new fundraising platform called Fundraiser, and part of that is using AI to do different price prompts. So it's really using that learning and really understanding the audience to give them a prompt that works for them. But part of it was just the basics. We stripped it down. What is the easiest flow for supporters? We did a lot of testing with supporters to make that flow look really, really easy for them and really intuitive and user-friendly. So our previous forms were, if you think of a direct mail pack, kind of on a web screen. So it was very busy, it was very confusing, whereas the new process is much more, right, step 1 to step 2 to step 3. And we did a lot of testing in terms of actually, did that approach work, and having a checkout. And I think that was really important. And that's a whole separate case study I can do in terms of how we did that thing. And I will say that if anybody does want to follow up with me, that I'm pretty easy to find. I am at Emily Casson on Twitter or LinkedIn. So I'm happy for, I know there's a lot of questions in the chat that we haven't had time for, but I am happy to kind of follow up with Rob and do a blog or something.
Thank you, Emily. Just so many lovely comments coming into the chat as to how helpful your session was. So thank you. I knew it would be, but also a special thank you this week of all weeks when you're really right on it, and so much hard work you and your team are doing, and clearly it's so crucial. So I do appreciate all the hard work you've put in to come and share these ideas, and thanks for that offer so that people can get in touch with you. No more words from me. I'll let you get away back to that important work, and I'd love to catch up with you soon anyway, Emily, but thank you. Wonderful. Goodbye.
Okay, thanks everybody.
And then I'm going to try and take a deep breath and move on to the second half of this session. And I mean, some of the themes I'm going to share are consistent with Emily's approach in terms of trying things, being bold, building relationship, not just seeking cash and so on. So you'll spot some similar themes. I have the privilege, I don't know, I appreciate some of you work with me a lot and have done my programs, and some of you, this might be your first experience of what I do, but for 22 years, I've worked in charities, and for 17 of them, I've been finding techniques and teaching techniques that can help you raise more money and enjoy doing so. And I've got a really privileged position that because I do all this teaching, I get to work with some really wonderful fundraisers through my mastery programs in my members club. We got shout out to some members who are logged on now, and in the interviews for my podcast as well. So through all of this, I have the privilege of finding these really brave, interesting, creative things that are happening. And what I'm going to do is share, actually, most of these examples are from people who are currently on my mastery programs or did the program last year. So I'm going to share 5 ideas that I've picked up from them in order to help you get inspired to do certain things. To be fair, they're not all going to be 5 things you never would have thought of yourself. You're probably working hard on some of these already, but I hope that my example or the way I say it might give you an extra edge in following through in working this way. And if I was to sum up, one of the dominant things, I was talking to someone called Sam a couple of weeks ago from Major Gift Mastery last year. She said, the reason I think I've just had such a surge in momentum, confidence and results is I'm at its simplest. I'm focusing day in, day out on building wonderful relationships with donors who care about a certain cause rather than seeking to the money. I'm not chasing after money. I'm deepening those relationships. And then those donors want to give for their reasons. And I know that's really obvious, but I also know that you've got colleagues who think your job is about chasing money. Please go and get us the money so that we can save these lives. So there's pressures that can cause us away from the problem solving and work to build relationships towards this more transactional, where can I find a partnership or find some money? And on my programs, I've got various metaphors and analogies and things to help people do the more helpful of those and not the distracting chase the money thing. And Cleo Grisani, she was on our Major Gift Mastery program last year, and she met up with me for the podcast a couple of months ago, and she was just talking about this fabulous 18 months she and her team have had of growth. And she particularly referred to this idea I have of looking at successful car people who tend to focus more of their energy on enticing people to do test drives and less of their energy on trying to make car sales and the psychological benefits of that, doing it that way round. And in the course, I also say, for us, test drives are coffees. Can we get more informal cups of coffee or virtual cups of coffee with our supporters or potential partners this month than we did last month? And saying it that way doesn't suddenly make it easy, because your donors aren't necessarily waiting for you to invite them for coffee. But saying it that way around, we have found is an awful lot easier than asking yourself on a wet Tuesday morning, where can I get a new partnership, or how can I get another big gift? So coffee's not chasing partnerships or money. And what I liked about Cleo, because I've been teaching this idea for years, what Cleo did was particularly bold. She went out and she was determined to protect her team from some of the distraction of chasing the money, the pressure of here's your target. She said on the podcast that for 18 months, she's done everything she can to protect them from that. In fact, they're not formally measured on money. They've got 2 KPIs. One is virtual coffees or real coffees. How many per week or per month are you getting? How many chats? And secondly, how many wow moments are we managing to create for our supporters? By which she means, and I talk about this in my programs, times when you help people feel special, or get a deeper insight. You create more surprise and delight than they expect. And that comes from a book by the Heath brothers called The Power of Moments. So those are the two KPIs, not here's your budget target. And what she said is, these KPIs don't suddenly make all work easy, but it has massively helped because the human brain is good at solving the problem in front of it. And, at its simplest, just day in, day out, small decisions change a bit when you go this way around, because someone might be emailing you with a question about something, and in the old way, you would just email back the answer. But if you're forever trying to get into a nice, friendly chat, if you think this way, you email back and just suggest, I just jump on a phone call now and explain it. It'd be much easier. So all these extra little conversations are happening in various subtle ways once you see it that way around, rather than getting kind of remaining in the email or less interesting, persuasive style of communication. But then it also, interestingly, gives you a chance to come up with strategies and tactics which go a big step ongoingly to solving this stuff. And one of the examples Cleo shares, I really love this. And again, I'm not saying this is the first time you'll have heard it, but I love the way Cleo executed it. She said, to create more wow moments, we and just chats, we thought, wouldn't it be lovely if on the 1 year anniversary that someone gave their first gift or set up a partnership, they received an extra nice congratulations from us? So if we don't have their phone number or permission, we send them a handwritten card. But if we do have their phone number and permission, on the 1 year anniversary, we call them up. And she's, again, crucially, there's a process to it. They've looked at the database and they've done the query and they've mapped out exactly when those 1 year anniversaries are. And Cleo's team have worked really hard for 18 months making those calls on that anniversary day. And if you listen to that podcast episode, I mentioned she's got a couple of really inspiring, heartwarming stories about how some of those phone calls have gone. Really appreciated, because they're not calling to ask for money, they're just calling to tell the donor they're wonderful and thank you for making this amazing stuff happen, saving lives, maybe share a story or two. Cleo, there's one that stands out from the podcast. She said one of her excellent colleagues, I think it might have been Alex, anyway, that person made a phone call to a donor, a very generous donor who was already giving £200 a month, and there was a really nice chat. And the fundraiser enjoyed the chat too. That's an extra benefit of this. You get re-inspired by talking to these people, and you get more confident about the phone if you're proactively making these nice phone calls. But the end to that story is, in due course, almost immediately, the donor who had received the call decided to change their giving from £200 a month to £400 a month. And happy to do so because they just got reconnected to the amazing difference it makes. So that's one of many stories which is consistent with why the income for high value at Shelterbox has gone up, is because of this. Some of the calls don't lead to extra giving in the short term, but if you make enough calls, some of them definitely are going to A, give more in the short term, and B, definitely be more loyal and generous in the medium and long term. Another interesting example I like from what Cleo has done, following on from those two KPIs, is this example. Now, like any good fundraiser, she's interested in the supporters, she's interested in the partners. So through these conversations, she's asking questions and listening rather than just telling. And she picked up a theme during the pandemic. I mean, probably know this feeling all too well. From many of the corporate partners, she noticed this theme of a problem for teams in companies and charities of being disconnected, hard to keep morale going, and so on. But one of these managers said to Cleo, "But look, Cleo, we've done our best, but what we don't need is yet another Zoom quiz." I mean, they're all well and good, but please not another Zoom quiz. We want if only there was something more meaningful way to bring the team together when we can't be together physically. Anyway, because Cleo is very proactive, she just mulled this over and she decided to take a risk and put a bit of energy and resource into solving this. And if you've heard the podcast, you know, she explained it in more depth. But the gist of what she did was she created like a team experience for corporate teams. Lasted about an hour and a half, I guess, something like that. And it was created by Cleo's colleague who works in the learning and development team at Shelterbox. But basically, if I were to sum it up, it's like an escape room experience, but it's all, the whole story of what you've got to solve is to do with Shelterbox's cause. So there you are, you're in, 10 of you in that corporate team supporting Shelterbox. You sign up for this thing, you donate, and then you get walked through this scenario of a disaster hitting, and you've got to solve stuff. You've got to assess the needs and make decisions about logistics and get stuff through customs and so on. And at the end, get the satisfaction of handing over that shelter box of life-saving things to a family that needs it. Talk about next level storytelling. People are in the story. I wasn't at all surprised to hear that the corporates have absolutely really loved this. They've connected with each other and at a far deeper level to the cause and to the stories that are to do with that. I'm sharing that just partly because I find it really inspiring. Just certain things some organizations can do. I'm also the first to say, not many of the charities on this call can necessarily replicate that, and that's not my point. But I just share it to just help me say, to what extent could we take our storytelling one notch better, let alone the 3 notches more sophisticated that Cleo's done. And but in my list of 5, this second one is, how can we create wow moments where you help people feel something, not just think something? And in particular, one category of wow moment I've got is, how could you do something that gives people an aha moment, a penny drop moment, because they just they feel something, they get a sense of what's at stake here. And like I say, you might not want or be able to do it the way they've done it, but here's a different way that I think is more accessible. Again, not accessible to every single cause. This tactic I'm going to share doesn't work for every single one, but we have shared it over our programs with a lot of charities that initially thought they couldn't apply this, and they found a creative way to do it. And again, if you want more depth on this, it's episode 80 and 81 of my podcast. The gist of that, what inspired me was, any Strictly fans out there? People who love Strictly probably remember in the autumn of last year, Rose, who's the only contestant on Strictly Come Dancing to be deaf, there was a moment where she planned for the music to stop, and she and Giovanni carried on dancing for 15 seconds beautifully, and it was really moving. And then the music kicked back in, they carried on dancing. But in that moment, she wouldn't say, I think this is exactly what I experienced, but she said she was trying to create an insight for us as to some of what it might be like to dance and not hear the music, or to be on an entertainment show and not to be able to hear the music. Anyway, I say in my blog and my podcast, there's a powerful thing you can do is, if you can help do some kind of, use a prop or some activity or demonstration which helps people get aha, penny drop moment insight as to for instance, what is so tough for the beneficiaries of our charity. And like I say, it doesn't work for every cause, but exploring it is very interesting. My colleague Ben shared various examples of how charities have done these little demonstrations successfully to a group. And I think he was working with an organization that worked with survivors of stroke. And they thought it really interesting. And they went and followed up, but they didn't initially have an equivalent to, for instance, the bubble wrap exercise that Ben had done, but that they fed back to Ben a few weeks later that they had found something that was working really well, and they've been doing it ever since, as far as I'm aware. And the gist was to, in a corporate pitch or in especially business networking events, to connect with and inspire businesses you haven't met before. They basically they hand out starbursts or opal fruits, sticky sweets, and they invite people to open the sticky sweet with their non-preferred hand, with their left hand. So even though I know what's coming, so I've done this 20 times before, I'm now getting weirdly irritated that I can't get the sticky sweet open. It's much harder to do than I want. And they take longer explaining it really clearly and properly. But the gist of it is, that corporate fundraiser or major donor fundraisers, it enables them to make the point that there are definitely some massive things after you've had a stroke which can really be tough for you and your family, like not being able to drive anymore, for instance, or you might have to lose your job. But equally, interestingly, what our survivors who we talk to tell us is actually some of what's so tough is the really tiny things within minutes of getting up. Every day, hundreds of little moments, like when you're trying to do up your buttons, which for the last 60 years of your life you've done up on your own, the losing of those moments of agency and independence can be every bit as demoralizing as the bigger things. So, I mean, you could just explain that, but they've made an art form of how to make that memorable and interesting in rapport in a pitch or a meeting with a donor. And I shared an example of these kinds of things on my current corporate partnerships mastery program, and one of the people has done a great version of this. Her name is Jane, and she, in fact, just before that, there's a different one with this with this straw, which I sometimes include when there's time. It's of an organization, a major donor fundraiser at an organization that helps children who've got a facial deformity that they were born with, or a cleft palate. And what this smart major donor fundraiser sometimes does is they, if there's rapport and they're in a meeting with a supporter or potential supporter, they just hand them a straw and invite them to, in order to explain a certain thing to do with the cause, invite them to have a little drink through the straw, and they put it to their lips and try and suck up the water, and this weird thing flashes across their head because no water is coming up, or hardly any is coming up. The reason for that is she's inadvertently sabotaged the straw beforehand by putting little holes in it, so there's no vacuum. And if you try and drink through a holy straw, it doesn't work. And in that moment, your brain gets this jolt of things not being as expected. And what she then explains is there are lots of good reasons why the operations our charity does are life-saving. They make a big difference. But for instance, to do with people's appearance can affect life chances. But one of them is as important as any in saving lives. It's to do with infant mortality. And apparently, if you're born with a cleft palate in many countries, you're more likely to die and not make it into childhood, because in order to get nourishment from the mother's breast, the mouth needs to be able to have a vacuum. And if you can't get a vacuum because of that kind of problem, cleft palate, then you might be more likely to die. So I think that's quite an interesting point anyway, which I wouldn't have known. This major donor fundraiser said that if and when she has got a little rapport with the person she's talking to and she can lead them through that little thing, it makes the point she makes much more memorable and interesting. Anyway, I go through various of these examples in my programs. Jane from an organization, different organization to do with lung disease and breathing conditions. She just fed back to me about a month ago about how she had used a technique like this towards the end of the pitch. And again, I'll summarize it, but the end of this presentation to a company, in the last minute, she just handed out straws. And she said that for many people who have these lung conditions, they say the suffering is so great. It's like every day trying to breathe with an elephant on your chest, or every day trying to breathe but only through a straw. That's all the way you can breathe. So Jane and her colleague invited people for the last 60 seconds to just breathe through the straw. Now, a couple of people chose not to, and she made it clear that was fine, but many of them did. And then they shared their experiences with each other. And they found that really interesting. Now, I think Jane is really clear that doing the demonstration isn't the only reason they won the partnership. The partnership's worth £200,000. There's various interesting things she did, but they did get positive feedback from the company that they really liked in the risk it took to bring the course to life in that interesting way. Now, if you're thinking, oh, sounds a bit risky, sounds about like gimmick territory, my donors wouldn't like that. I know that, there are challenges you need to solve if you're going to do this kind of thing well, but do check out my podcast and my blog, because in that I give the examples, and I also give 2 or 3 key things you can do to prevent the chances that these things will be seen as a silly gimmick. If you're going to grow corporate partnerships, I think one thing you need to do is be proactive, not reactive. You've got to go after companies that will be a great fit, not just receive. Respond to invitations you get. Secondly, I think if you're going to do that, you need to have a focus. You can't do that with a spreadsheet with 82 charity company names on it. You're never going to be proactive in a new business sense. So you need to focus. Focus is power. But if you're going to do that, how do you choose? Well, actually, on our corporate mastery program, we have several answers to that question. But one of them, one of the less obvious ones, is don't just go after companies that could fund your stuff, could generate cash for you. Definitely, you need lots of that. And it works because your brand has certain value. And so whilst if the company can be positioned alongside your brand to its employees and to its customers, then that's valuable and can lead to really valuable partnerships. But another great question is, who would you work with, even if it wasn't about the money, because that company could further your mission? For instance, because of their resources, their expertise, or who their audience is. And this is Kieran. He's a brilliant fundraiser for Royal Shakespeare Company. And he was on our last corporate mastery program. He and his brilliant colleague, they've been putting together some really great partnerships in the last year or so. And to sum up this point I'm making now, this was so eye-catching. I really liked it. So there they are, the Royal Shakespeare Company. Of course, they've got various strategic objectives for that theatre company. But one of them, this partnership just makes so much sense to me when I heard about it. It's with TikTok. And I believe it's called something like TikTok £10 tickets. And can you see how, of all the partners they could work with, this one I think would be top of the list in order to help them get their message and their work out to younger people who ordinarily might not be interested or get access to the theatre. And one of the most interesting things about it is it was an idea from the Youth Advisory Board at RSC. Were saying, we really should be working with someone like TikTok. And Kieran and his colleague were smart enough to use that authority frame in the conversations with TikTok. So number 3, which companies could help you achieve your mission? In a moment, I'm going to do the last 2, but just whenever I do these sessions, some people have questions about these 6-month mastery programs that I've been mentioning. So I'll do my gist to do the 1-minute version to answer this. They're 6-month courses with masterclasses with me and one-to-one coaching with a really good major gifts or corporate fundraiser who coaches you through how to implement them. And we just find confidence and results tend to go up. If you're curious about it, the program that lasts a year because you get extra coaching through the year is platinum level. It's 2,700. The mastery level program, that's the 6-month one that most of these guys I've mentioned today, is 1,997. And if you're curious, you've been meaning to get in touch, do get in touch today via the form that's in the chat box, because there's a decent discount there of £400 off, brings it down to 1,597. So if you're interested, it's information on my website, but also send me a message via the link that's in the chat box. We've done it for 8 years. If you share these kinds of techniques and support people in implementing them, we find it just does work. But if you're at all not sure, my guarantee is that if you're not completely delighted that this is already working and valuable by the end of day one, I'll give you all your money back and I'll give £500 to your charity. That's how certain we are that it works. All of the risk is on me. I think the wonderful Eleanor is actually on this this event now. I think I saw her saying hello in the chat. So Eleanor, thank you for that really helpful conversation you had with me a couple of weeks ago, in which you shared this really interesting example of how you have helped your team be more confident and persuasive when talking to companies and supporters. So for everyone else, one of the modules in Corporate Mastery and Manager Mastery is on storytelling, influence and persuasion in a positive sense of the word. And Eleanor really liked some of the things I taught about storytelling, and she went and shared them with her team and got them much more proactive and confident to go and find out real examples of the difference her charity Action for Children makes. I think it was January when Eleanor first fed back to me this really lovely little example of, number one, her team having those chats and being really happy to discover that the frontline colleagues in the projects, most of them are really happy to be asked those kinds of questions and share those stories. And secondly, this very specific example, and it was really current, one of Eleanor's brilliant team heard this really heartfelt little example. It's not a fancy example, but it's a heartfelt little real example that had happened in her, I think it was in the northwest. It was mid-December. A family that was really struggling financially had managed to scrape and save for Christmas presents and so on. And then in mid-December, their flat was burgled, everything was taken, and they were devastated, as were the children. And they literally didn't know what to do. Action for Children's got this emergency fund, just really short-term, quick help when people are really struggling. And basically they were able to help them really quickly with that money, and not only save Christmas, but really save the family's morale and faith that they would get through this. And Eleanor's colleague just loved that little example. And when she was on the phone to companies in December about their Christmas appeal, she was mentioning that story. And tellingly, one of those calls with a local law firm that had never supported the charity before, by the end of the call, they were fully in and donated £5,000. And they were explicit that one of the things that just moved them was that concrete real example. Now, if you know my work, you know that concrete real examples are a major fuel that can help everyone be more interesting, persuasive, proactive when talking to supporters. But my other point, though, is it's not just for events. If you listen to episode 87 with Linda, she's achieved this wonderful growth for 3 years. But a key thing about how she works is stories are for everywhere. Events, thank you emails, informally in conversation, on WhatsApp, she's sharing these photos and videos and quotes and things. So stories everywhere is a key extra distinction. And my last of these 5 main points is to do with pitching. Again, I haven't got time to go into all of it. It's such a big, sophisticated topic, but in episode 92, I share 5 key tactics that can help you win more pitches when you are asked to come and present in that formal sense. And to bring it to life, the wonderful Laura Matthews from Hearing Dogs for Deaf People, she came on the podcast, and she was on Corporate Mastery last year. She comes along and on the podcast and tells the story in some detail as to how she applied those ideas. And again, won a pitch worth more than £220,000. So do check out that one. It just give you some insight. I'm not saying all of what she did will apply for your next presentation, but it might just reassure you or inspire you to do certain things differently or better. If I were to sum up a key thing Laura said as to why she felt the pitch went well, she said it was because we worked so hard to understand the company's point of view. And in my book, I say, you'll always have the edge if you work hard to understand and appreciate their world. And this other, because most charities want to talk about what they've got to say, actually in practice, less about understanding what the other party how they see things. So my central metaphor in that Win That Pitch module of Corporate Mastery is this idea of a beach ball. Okay, here's the brief version. If you are holding up a beach ball, bear with me, between you and the person you're seeking to persuade, and they can see the blue, white, and green panels that are on their side, and you can see in the red, yellow, and orange, what tends to happen, I know this sounds crazy, what tends to happen when a fundraiser writes a proposal or does a pitch or presentation is they talk largely about how wonderful this potential partnership would be. They tend to talk largely in terms that are red, yellow, and orange, and hardly at all genuinely in terms that are blue, white, and green, i.e., what be so great about this partnership from the way you see it, and what you need, what you're interested in. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying every corporate pitch needs to be all about only commercial benefit. Some partnerships are entirely or almost entirely about just making a difference in the world. But even then, are you describing making a difference in the world the way their employees or their customers would language the problem that needs to be solved philanthropically, or are you describing it in the way your charity tends to talk about this problem? So the gist of how, lots of people get better at pitching who've done my courses is they work harder at gathering that insight. And then secondly, they follow through on that insight in the design of a pitch. So their pitches are never generic. They're always start from scratch, tailor it to suit this audience and their side of the beach ball, which doesn't mean you don't talk about what your charity wants and the difference it would make, but you do so understanding the way they see that thing. And there's various examples of how this pans out, but just two of them. Laura said we got this realization that a key commercial extra thing for them is if they could increase foot traffic around their stores. So we visited their stores and we designed this little treasure hunt fundraising activity that would take people around the store, and we mocked it up in signage that was similar to their own signage, in keeping with their signage. And we asked someone who worked in a store, do you think this would work actually in practice? So all of those extra steps enabled Laura to go along to the pitch, knowing that she'd done her best to really not only have it be valuable, but be able to bring to life that it was valuable. So there's lots more to it than that. If you're interested, do check out that episode. If I were to sum it all up, then can you get more coffees? Rather than, and that can skew you away from focusing on relationship, more wow moments where you help people feel things or you create delight for them. A couple of examples of that. The RSC examples was one of many I could share of how a great partnership sometimes brings value and reach, solve other problems, not just money. Stories, could you find more? I know it's not easy, but could you solve the problems to find more and proactively share more? And lastly, overarching so much of what Emily and I have talked about today is, can we understand their side of the beach ball? I hope that at breakneck speed, some of those ideas might just have resonated for you, give you an extra impetus from the story to apply what you were going to do anyway, but you could bring it to life for your team, maybe by using that example. I'm going to wrap things up very quickly. I've barely mentioned our Bright Spot Members Club, although great to see some of our members on this session now. We're not taking you on individual members now, but if you're interested in team membership, we are happy to have a chat about that. And it is a discounted, it's better than half price compared to the individual membership. So do get in touch if you'd like to chat to me about team memberships of Bright Spot Members Club, where you get access to all these films and these weekly sessions from me. Lots and lots of learning bundles in there. But we just about got your way by 10 o'clock. Huge thank you to Emily. Loved that session. I hope you found it as helpful as I did. I hope my ideas were helpful too. Even if you just choose one or two things from the whole thing you go and implement and decide to do that, I hope that will give you an extra lift in your fundraising week. Next Breakfast Club is on the 25th of May with the incomparable Liz Tate. Some of you are aware of just what a brilliant leader and fundraiser she is. She's going to come along, so save the date for 25th of May. Thank you to everyone who's been tweeting and sharing on LinkedIn about this stuff. I really appreciate your help. So without more ado, thank you for all the hard work you do to make the world a safer, better, more hopeful place. Keep doing what you're doing. I know it's not always easy, but keep doing whatever you possibly can. I hope today's session was helpful. We'll see you in May. Thank you. Bye-bye.